Hey everyone, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, a very special guest, somebody that I just met 10 minutes ago. We've exchanged some messages back and forth. He's got a beard on his face. First time in 32 years of growing out full facial hair. Assistant Chief, retired out of Fairfax County, Virginia, Dan Shaw. Dan, thanks for joining me, brother.
Oh, thanks, Jeremy. Glad to be here. I'm glad we could finally connect and have a real conversation.
Chief, the beard looks good. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. I mean, I can't grow it above my eyebrows, but below, apparently I can.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you this. Really interesting how things work in my life, right? So I had a guy from my volley house up here in New Jersey, went down to Fairfax, got hired, went through the academy, and I went to his graduation. I drove 5 hours down in the morning, went to the graduation, jumped in the car after an hour, and drove 5 hours back. But super important to be there for your guys, especially guys that pursue the fire service as a career. And so it was important for me to be there. I felt like I was one of his more senior guys in the firehouse and helped them in a lot of ways. And so it was a real honor for me to be there. I will tell you this, Chief, you spoke at that ceremony. That was my first interaction with you. And I was sitting in the crowd just up in the top row. Nobody knew I was there. It was great. I love that. And man, you spit fire. And I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm not blowing smoke. I know you're a public speaker. You did the 2022 keynote for FDIC. You have a class. You and Doug Mitchell are good friends. You guys teach. You wrote a book together. Your pedigree goes on and on and on. But it's one thing for it on paper. It's another to see it firsthand. And I got to sit there in the audience, and I will tell you what you did that day was you put forth the level of expectation from the new recruits. You addressed them basically by name, looked at them in the eyes, you spoke to their families, and it was 100% authentic, Chief. And after, 32 years in the fire service, 29 in Fairfax as you retired, you haven't lost your passion. And if anything, you probably have more today than you did when you started.
Oh, yeah. One, thank you for the generous compliment. You're right, man. Those people I spoke to, our recruits, that's what fueled it. You know, I was really fortunate Fairfax, I'll be the biggest cheerleader. I mean, I stumbled upon that organization because of some people when I was a volunteer and I was working part-time in Howard County, Maryland, outside of Baltimore. They told me, hey, man, you need to apply to Fairfax. I'm like, great, where is it?
Yeah, right.
I applied everywhere. I mean, I was in every process under the sun. And it was the greatest decision I ever made. And that organization just provided me such a great foundation, not only in the training, they run 130,000 calls a year, the experience level, but also just the people, the exceptional people, and to have more exceptional people come into the organization and to have the privilege to be their chief of operations. It's a constant motivator. And you really, that whole process, I mean, that I go back to, and I have to give it some gratitude. And I don't think we do that enough in the fire service, right? To have enough gratitude. But, gratitude to my boss. John Butler is the fire chief in Fairfax. We've been friends because we both were in Howard County for almost 30 years. But that time slot's reserved for him. That's reserved for the fire chief to address his recruits. And because he knew I was retiring in 4 days, he said, hey, why don't you do the keynote to them?
Nice.
I'm like, well, thank you. I would love to.
Yeah.
Because, in many organizations, like we're just about a 2,000 member organization, 1,500 of those people were in my bureau in operations. And so, the opportunity and the privilege to be able to talk with them about just a simplistic message. Because I remember what it was like, because I think I told them 71 recruit schools before when I sat in the same seat as them. It seemed really daunting that, God, there's so many things that are happening. What should I do? How do I act? Let's try to keep it simple. And just remember, it's all about impact. It is all about the impact you have. The day you leave the job, no one cares about the number of medals hanging off your Class A. What they will remember is the impact you have on them. And that's what's really important. I think it's where a lot of people miss the mark when it comes to this type of things, because they just think about a lot of these awards and these accomplishments they want to make. But at the end of the day, I even go back to when Doug and I did 25 Survive, you have to write the credits and acknowledgments in the book. And given, now we're talking about before we went on air.
Right.
Yeah, neither Doug or I are John Steinbeck. A book?
Right.
Is it a coloring book?
Yeah, right. Somebody's got this off, yeah.
Yeah. And the acknowledgement just came to me so easy. It came down to a guy when I was 16 years old, started volunteering. And all I wanted to do was ride the rescue squad. It's Ellicott City Volunteer Fire Department. It's a combination system, paid volunteer guys. They had an engine and a rescue. And the rescue was this big, beautiful Ranger rescue, walk-in cab in the back. And I just wanted to ride that thing. But one of the paid firefighters there said, look, no, you don't ride this unless you kind of go through a process. All right, I'm in. What's the process? No understanding at this point when I'm that young to know this paid guy said, all right, look, you show up at 1900 hours every night we're working on C shift, and we will spend time going through each compartment. And if you meet the level of proficiency I think you should meet, okay, you can ride the rescue. So every C shift, I showed up down to Firehouse, and Andy Lieb knows his name. Andy spent probably from 7 o'clock until 10, 11, midnight, going through this compartment, teaching me everything he had to share to a volunteer when he didn't have to do it. I mean, he's already been up for 12 hours just so I could do it. And then he imparted so much advice onto me that, I was just trying to absorb it all. I mean, the reason I went to college is because, there's multiple motivators, my family, everyone else, but like Andy telling me, hey, listen, fire department can take a lot of things away from you. They can take your pay. They can take your rank. They can never take your knowledge. And if they pay for you to go accumulate knowledge, you better go do it. Okay. So it was really easy for me to give, that acknowledgement to him. And the coolest thing was we came back to Howard County to do a class several years later. Doug and I came back to do 25 Survive. And I've been trying to track Andy down for years because he had since retired from Howard. He's working in a different organization. Couldn't find him. Couldn't get him anywhere. So I want to give him a book. He comes walking in with his two sons who now are adult age, who are firefighters. He said, oh, man, I saw you coming. I told my two kids, they got to come hear you talk because you're sharing good stuff. I'm like, well, let me address your two sons.
Right.
The reason I'm here is because of your father.
Yeah.
Because what your father did. So here's some books for you. And that was, a really great moment. It goes back to, what I was saying in the very beginning, long drawn out way to get there. It's about impact, right? That's what people remember. I don't remember much of a lot of other things during our career. I mean, lots of good jokes, lots of good back and forth, but I remember the people who had a tremendous impact in my career. And so the opportunity and privilege to be able to have that, to talk to directly these people that I'm responsible for, like that's just, man, it's gold.
There's so many things here, right? Two things that stand out to me right away, right? One, mentorship, so critical in the fire service. But the other side of it that we don't talk about when we talk about mentorship is your willingness to be mentored. This gentleman saw something in you as a 16-year-old kid. He didn't have to do that, but he saw something in you and was willing to go all in on you. The only way guys are going to go all in on their people is if you're showing a capacity for wanting more. We have to be willing to be mentored, right, Chief?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And absolutely. I mean, and mentoring, like, I think we just misuse that word. I mean, has anyone ever came up to someone in the fire service and say, hey, I'd like you to mentor me?
Right.
It's rare, like, because there's so much bravado in our trade. But, if a leader, and it doesn't mean rank, if a leader can get out of their own way and recognize when someone is like peppering you with questions because they want to, gain some more of your knowledge,
right? And
they're asking you these things, and they're mirroring what you're doing, or whether it's on a fire ground, a firehouse, they're asking you to be mentored.
Yes,
and whether you like it or not, you're mentoring them.
Because
they're looking at what you're doing, and so I think the less that we look at that as some sort of burden and more of a privilege. That again will be successful because we have so many people in the fire service. And Fairfax is a perfect example. We hire about 100 people every year. So that means, we have 100 people who are probably leaving the organization, not, who are retiring.
Sure.
So how do you just maintain that consistency of excellence? Well, you got to bridge that gap somehow. You got to be able to communicate all that things we have there. And like I told those recruits, right? I mean, when people see our patch, it instills certain adjectives, fantastic adjectives, whether it's aggressive or it's compassionate or it's professional or it's integrity. All those adjectives were not earned by any of those probies sitting in that seat. They were earned by all the people who left before them. But the beauty of it is they're now the stewards of that. And so you can look at that as a burden or you can look at that as a privilege. And now you have the privilege to say all these things. The reason I came to this organization, because when I see this patch, I think these things, you get to maintain that brand.
There's this idea that I have about Fairfax County Fire and Rescue. And this is from somebody that doesn't know anything about them other than what I've seen from afar as a spectator. And then obviously one of my guys going through the Probe Academy there and just came home like 2 weekends ago and had a great conversation with him about how things are going. But there is this this aura about that department that stands out as a very thorough and well put together, well organized, and well operating department. And even as somebody that's looking from the outside in, for you guys to have that persona, I can only imagine what it looks like from in the trenches. Because as a spectator, it looks great and it looks really well run. So I have to ask, Chief, like from your early days all the way up through the process to probably the number 2 seat in the department, basically, what did that look like for you? Was it always that way, or did you have that foundation coming in, or did you guys continually grow that foundation to where you are today?
Well, I think anyone who says they don't have the bell curve in their firehouse, their fire department, they're a liar.
Right.
We all have the bell curve, right? I mean, we have high performers, we have low performers, we have the guy in the middle who owns a landscaping business that's just showing up every third day to do his work. So we all have that. But what I found was like that organization is such a professional fire department.
Yeah.
They're just the high level of what is expected of you when you wear that uniform is just permeates throughout. And I think, we're no different than any other fire department, right? Do we have our troubles? Yeah, 100%. Sometimes we hire the wrong people that turn out to be, problematic? Yeah. But we also hire some really exceptional people who do exceptional things. And what I found was, I wish I could take a lot of people, again, the privilege of getting to teach around the country.
Sure.
When you get to go around and see other fire departments, you get out of your own silo. And when you get out of that silo, you see how the other half lives and you go, I work for a pretty great place.
Yep.
I know every fire I went to, I was really fortunate because I got to achieve every rank up to chief of operations. So when I was an engine driver, when I was an engine officer, when I was a truck boss, when I was a battalion chief, all those ranks, I got like 50 people on a fire within 8 to 10 minutes.
Right.
And so were all 50 of those people just the top notch? No, they were human.
That's right.
But if someone had a bad day, there was probably 4 more who came here and picked up your slack and carried it for you. And then you go teach a class in some department, they're like, we get 10 people on a fire, and maybe in 45 minutes we get those 10 people.
Right.
And so their margin for error is much greater. So when every time I would teach, man, I'd be refueled. I go back and say, God, I am so grateful for where I work. And it was a lot of the people who came up through it. Like when I got promoted to the ops chief, I worked for some really exceptional ops chiefs. One is now the chief of Charlotte Fire Department. The other one, he was chief in Fairfax City after he left us. And just those guys were so fantastic as leaders that they had set the bar so high. This is true in society. It doesn't matter if we're talking about fire department. People are raised to your level of standard, they drop to your level of tolerance. One of the two things happens. And what I saw across the board with my organization where I worked was there was no time to look for a level of tolerance because the standard was up here all the time.
Right.
And so when you're always trying to achieve that standard, because I didn't want to let any of those guys down, they were my role models. And I was really fortunate. Like I worked at some great companies. And my heart is always to Bailey's Crossroad, Engine 10. It's like where I spent a good amount of my career. I was the engine driver, then I was the engine officer there, and I was a battalion chief in that battalion. It's just, that pedigree that came out of that one particular firehouse was just reflective of the entire organization.
What?
And
go ahead.
you had those great groups of people, and that's what, in every one of those ranks, that's where I think that's our mission, right? As a battalion chief, my job was to break down silos. We have 5 firehouses in a battalion. There's, 8 battalions. So I need all 5 of my firehouses to operate as one battalion. Respect the esprit de corps of the individual companies, but how do I get them to all move? And then when you're the deputy, when I was the ops deputy, we had the entire 400 miles and 40 plus firehouses. And then now we have 2 deputies. But your job was to get all your battalions.
Right.
Respect the esprit de corps, but get them to move together. And as the ops chief was, how do I get 1,500 people to all move together because there's something beautiful when a group of people are shoulder to shoulder leaning in the same direction.
Symphony, man.
Yeah, it's just great.
Yeah.
And so you have that opportunity, and that's where that's what I loved about that organization is there was nuances to every single one. I used to always joke like you could sit at a kitchen table and look across and go, if we're in a normal world, I wouldn't be friends with probably half these people because they're so vastly different than us.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because we share this common bond that
That's
we're going
right.
to go down this hallway together, all those barriers are gone. So why can't we do that for the battalion? Why can't we do that for the organization?
But how do you do it? And I know that's such a loaded question because it's so big, right? But like you talked about a few chiefs that you worked for that were real standouts, and they made you want to be better. You didn't want to disappoint them. What was it about them or their style or their way of communication or leadership that stood out to you? And then you want to emulate that with your spin, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the first part is every single one of those. Like, I remember always being around some chiefs and thinking to myself, like, God, man, they're a chief. They know everything. And you realize that that's not the case, right? I mean, I always love the Stoics. I love reading the Stoics, right? And one of the things is man cannot learn what he thinks he already knows.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So don't be arrogant. Like,
right.
Our job is always throwing these things at us. And I preach this during classes all the time. And whatever position I was at, I think the people I got the opportunity to lead will probably get so sick of me hear me saying it, is that I'd always tell them, the fire always gets a vote. That is something that should resonate in your head every single time we do something. We can train every single day. We can do this every single day. But guess what? When we show up to this fire, the fire doesn't assimilate to our manuals. It doesn't assimilate to our plans. It doesn't care about if you're tired. It always gets a vote. So every person I worked for, they didn't say that, but they demonstrate. Their actions showed it. And so their expectations were really high. And not only were their expectations high, they supported you.
Yes.
They supported you to say, listen, I want you to achieve this. I want you to do this on the fireground. And here's how you're going to get to this pathway. And I think that's where a lot of times we miss the mark in leadership is that, and I'll go back to each of the chief ranks I got to. I learned from these great mentors, right? A really poor leader is going to show up on day one. There might be some things you have to fix, right? Let's say you're a battalion chief. You roll into your battalion. You got 5 firehouses. You got 60 plus firefighters assigned to you that you're responsible for. And it's always important to remember that you're responsible for them. And you walk in, you just hand them a manifesto. Like, this is my manifesto, and I'm changing all this. And what did you just do to all those people? You just completely disenfranchised them. And I learned from my mentors is like, the best thing to do is just shut up. Shut up and go listen. Go do a listening tour. Go spend some time, sit on your hands, unless there's some things you have to fix. Like, if you go some places, we've all been those places where, hey, I need you to go fix this, or, go do that. But you go on some measure of a listening tour, and I would tell the people I work with, whether I was a battalion talking to captains, lieutenants, or I was the deputy talking to the battalions, or the assistant chief talking to the deputies. Hey, listen, let's get together because let's do it over a meal because that's the most important place to break bread. Break bread. Have great conversations. Mm-hmm. But here's a list of some questions just to get us started so we're not staring at each other awkwardly when we come have a conversation, which never happened.
Where's this going?
I always ask the same first question. I'm like, what do you expect of me as fill in the blank chief? Because I want you to know what you want me to do. Like, what do you expect of me? And Jeremy, I tell you, 99% of them said the same thing. Be present, be supportive.
Yeah.
None of that costs me money.
Right.
None of that's a budgetary issue. It's not a training issue. It's just they want you to be present. Yes. Like when we're doing drills, show up. When we're here in the firehouse, show up. When we run calls in the middle of the night, recognize that, hey, maybe I forgot to do this one thing because it's the 20th call I run. It's the 5th after midnight. Be human, right? And the other part of being supportive is like, we would always kind of dig into that question. Like, well, what do you mean by that? Because sometimes the supportive might be me telling you you're wrong. But if we all start with every single one of our firefighters shows up with positive intent, I believe that when firefighters show up to someone's worst day of their life, when they call 911, everyone in that fireground shows up with positive intent. And if that's the threshold we start at, and then you realize, like, we've learned a lot about the impact of stress on human performance, the stuff that Jay Bresler's doing, all the things we've learned, that they're human. But did they show up with some nefarious action, they wanted to be a coward, you can recognize that from a million miles away. You can handle it. But for the most part, our people show up and they want to do great work. So why did we deviate? Oh, because, when I look at it, I was really fortunate to do work on Josh Alaire's line of duty death report from
Right.
Frederick. And one of the things we kind of wrote, and we always came back to, is like an editorial note. There's a complete understanding that we're writing this report in a climate controlled office with the outcome known and none of the stress that was on these individuals.
Right.
So if you lose that focus as a leader and go, why do they do that? Well, do you remember what it was like to be in the right front seat at 3:00 in the morning and roll up to a house on fire with a mom yelling in your face while you're trying to give an on-scene report and your driver's trying to figure out how to get to the hydrant because a cop just blocked it and you had to be perfect? That's tough. But how do we rebound? How do because that's what we measure our success in the fire service a lot of time is our adaptability and how resilient we are. So to go back to your question, like all the leaders I worked for, they were really good at that. They had a high expectation. They communicated those expectations. Their commander intent was very clear to me, and that they were supportive. And every idea that I ever came to them with, they would push back on me and say, all right, well, that's great. I don't need an idea, man. Tell me what your idea is, how we're going to implement it. Why is it a benefit? What's it going to cost us? And what's that program look like? And if it's good, go with it.
Yeah.
And so that resonated with me because that's empowerment, right?
Without a doubt. And that's what we need more of today. The problem, though, Chief, with empowerment, it has to come from a place of stability, meaning our officers who give our people, you empower your people, they have to be confident in their own skills and abilities and position. And if they're not, they'll never empower anyone below them. And that is what I think we're facing in the fire service today is we have a lot of leaders that do not empower their people. They don't have enough confidence in their own skills and abilities. And so they'll never promote anyone below them to do more because they're holding them back.
Well, and I think one of those linchpins that's lacking, let's look at line of duty death reports, right? Take every line of duty death report, and I will tell you, like, and it's not knocking NIOSH, like, what they have to do with 4 people to investigate all line of duty deaths across the country, and they have to operate in teams of 2, you're not getting that deep into it. And they're trying to do better, right? But if you look at all those reports, whether internal or external, you peel back the onion, I can guarantee you they're going to look at training, they're going to look at doctrine, they're going to look at accountability, they're going to look at human performance. So if I was a leader, I would go, all right, what have I done? Let's use basement fires, right? We have a firefighter gets injured or killed in a basement fire. So NIOSH or a group of SMEs you bring in to do a report for you, they're going to look at it and go, all right, so what's your training on basement fires? We don't have any.
Right.
Okay, good. All right. So what's your doctrine? What's your SOG, your manual, your SOP on basement fire tactics? We don't have one. All right, so what's your accountability? Right? And not just the physical accountability system, but accountability. Like as the ops chief, I'm accountable to the people I lead. I'm accountable to the constituents that are our citizens. I'm accountable to a fire chief. I'm accountable to the board. That kind of accountability. What's that look like? Well, Jerry screwed up on a fire before. We didn't do anything about it. So zero accountability.
Right.
And what kind of training do you do about the impact of stress on human performance? Doug always says in class, like, we teach people to crawl, run, then run in dark with scissors. So you escalate, right? So what are you teaching? Yeah, what are you teaching people? And so if I was a leader, I would look and go, let me just do an audit of my own organization. Say if I had a basement fire right now and someone got hurt and killed, would I be embarrassed? Would I really have a good firm foundation to say what I did was I prepared all our people for the most problematic thing we do? Because, look, I mean, we know in the American Fire Service, every 64 seconds we go to a residential building fire. Then the data tells us that one of the most common fires we run is a basement fire.
Yes.
So
what are we doing?
You start to look at that as a leader, you go, okay, what have I done to prepare our organization for that? And I think the last part of that, and this is exactly to your point, why don't people feel confident and competent to be able to give that type of leadership? Well, one, they're not trained to do it.
Right.
So they don't even feel comfortable doing it. And it can be intimidating. I mean, like you look at all these platforms.
100%, it's intimidating. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a firefighter could jump on right now and see, like, whether it's something that we do in fire engineering with Google Hangouts or what you're doing with podcasts, like all these people talking about this wealth of experience. And you're like, oh, my God. I'm a leader and I have to set this bar.
Right.
No, no one expects you to know everything. That's why we came into this job. But I think the thing that's really missing, and I just had the privilege to go back to Minfrey, University of Maryland Fire Rescue Institute, and do a class last week. That's where I started as an instructor. And we were talking about engine company operations, residential building fires. And I told them, like, the last part of the equation is feedback. We're god awful at feedback. If you've ever been to a fire where a chief officer says, after you've exhausted an enormous amount of effort, well, the fire went out and no one got hurt. That would happen if we didn't show up.
That's right.
Mostly everyone would run away and the fire would run out of fuel.
Yeah,
but
it's not a victory.
When we ask an exceptional amount of our people, and we put people on the PAL doctrine, right? We put people in the harm's way. We better have a clear purpose. And so when they come out of that, how do you give them feedback? Because if I'm an officer and I've been to a couple fires and now I'm responsible for these people I lead every day, do I feel really confident that I can share this information with my firefighters to kind of teach them? Because I'm not really sure if I'm really good or if I'm mediocre. Like this, when people see my beloved engine come down the street, do they go, "Oh God," or do they go, "Oh God"?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, because a leader hasn't given me feedback. And I think when you go back to, if we start with positive intent, everyone showed up with positive intent, and you say, "Man, look, as soon as we finish this fire," and this is one of the things we share in Fairfax, like we mandate a tailboard critique that you will have after with the officers, and the officers go do it with their firefighters. And it's not a perfect process yet. I think it's getting there. But I broke it down and I said, look, man, I want you guys to focus on these 7 things. If you focus on these 7 things, I'm usually a spectator if I ever come out to a fire. When I come out to a fire, I'm a spectator because you're doing exceptional work. But that is, look, give them a framework. How do we do in our communications? How do we do in our positioning? How do we do in our water supplies? How do we do in our first line, second line, our primary, secondary, our ladders, ventilation? If you look at those 7 things, I can bet you're probably successful with your fire.
Fundamentals on the fire ground.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then if you look at line of duty deaths, I bet you the wheels on the bus came off around number 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Terrible communications, no on-scene report, no one took a lap. They positioned the engine where the truck should be, so there's delay in getting ground ladders to the person on the second floor who was trapped. They only got 1 water supply and it failed. And so, like, when you give feedback and people are doing this, you close that loop and say, okay, man, we just had this fire. We had a working fire. It went really well. Let me start with me as a leader, as the incident commander. Man, I missed your communication from the second floor. I think I was trying to transition and get a good position, and I missed your transmission. But I think we course corrected. I think we had some pretty good strategy and tactics. If you start that as a chief, what do you think you just did to the entire group of officers?
Yep. You opened it up.
Yeah. You just took down their defenses, because it's not a defense statement. The guy in charge just said he screwed up and he was able to adapt and change. So if you communicate that and say, okay, how do we do on our communications? Hey, look, man, your on-scene report is spot on. But your lap, you didn't give me much out of that. It didn't really help out. But, hey, second due engine or third due engine, because you go to side Charlie, you really cleaned that up for him. That was good stuff. And so you have this maintained this dialogue that happens. Now you're teaching it, because I firmly believe autonomy breeds mastery, right? The more autonomy you're giving them, and now they feel that they can go do this, and it's okay if they make a mistake, because there's these redundancies to fix it, and they're going to get feedback, because that's accountability, and we fix it. And if it continues to happen, obviously the dark side of accountability and feedback is discipline. But we don't have to go there often, because our people want to do great work. They want to show up on someone's worst day and fix their problem.
Right. I just think at times that humility gets the best of people, and they're not willing to accept responsibility or sign on that they didn't follow through, or that course correction didn't happen in a timely fashion or something like that. And so they're not willing to allow others to make those mistakes because they won't admit their own mistakes. And that I think has become a very big issue for all of us. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I used the quote when I was did the FDIC keynote was, lions being led by donkeys.
That's it.
You don't need that.
Listen, society, the way of the world does not. It's not separate from the fire service. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of the same issues that other industries or just society as a whole deals with. We're dealing with that every day. Something you mentioned before that really stood out to me. I made a note on it. You said professional. You were talking about Fairfax County. You talked about professional. And it got me thinking about what the actual true meaning of professional means. Because we always say, I always talk about professional and proficient. We want our fire departments to be professional and proficient at our jobs, at what we do, serving the public, et cetera, et cetera. But that word professional, I don't think we explore that enough. And I wrote true meaning and underlined it and circled it because I want to explore it in my own head, but I want to challenge you on that a little bit. When you say professional, I was talking about Fairfax and what, as a spectator, what I believe Fairfax to be, and I do believe it to be a professional fire department because of all the things that I have seen as a spectator. You being on the inside, what does professional truly mean when it comes to a fire service organization?
And that's a great question because, there's probably a multitude of meanings depending on where you work and what your organization is. I think it's kind of twofold. One is professional is, how do we conduct ourselves internally? What do we do to maintain a high level of discipline, whether it is and how we conduct ourselves, how we carry forth, go back to what I talked about with the patch, right? Professional means you have pride in that patch, but that your brand recognition is really high. And that you understand that brand recognition is high. And to maintain that brand recognition, you have to do these things, right? And those things are what make you professional. But I think the biggest benchmark, if you're a professional or not, is the people we serve. What does the public think of you? Because I always told our guys, like, I think as a leader, you have to have some sort of motto or mantra that you live by. So it's consistent. So people know what you do. If I walked into a firehouse and you're a company officer, and I pulled each one of your firefighters in a room and said, "Hey, what's your captain's motto? Like, what are they? When it comes down to what is it for them?" And if they're all over the place, then you go back to kind of commander's intent. If you have to have purpose, if without purpose, then what are we doing? And that's what I would always share with our people. And I think the Army is the one who really coined it. I really loved it and just kind of adopted what we did in the fire service. Mission first, people always.
Yes.
Because without our mission, we wouldn't be on this podcast. No one could care. Because our mission is paramount. But there's no way we will ever accomplish our mission without our people. And so we have to be able to, that kind of twofold. And it goes back to what your question of like, what is professional?
Yeah.
Ask the people you serve, because that's our mission. And if your public thinks that you are a highly professional department because you do all these things, when that bell goes off and that call comes in, you conduct yourself as a professional. Whether it's the working fire with kids trapped or it's 3 o'clock in the morning, it's your 15th run, and you have to go pick someone off the floor, you're still professional.
Yeah.
And what you do and how you conduct yourself. So I think it is twofold. I think internally it is, how do we build a system that maintains that reputation, right? And that's through the way we train. That's through the way that we mentor, the way we bring people up, the way we give feedback, the way we just continue that we want you to be the best at what you are. Because as well as I do, leadership is about bringing the best out of people, right? Getting them to believe that they're as good as you think that they are. I think you'll be an exceptional officer. No, I'm not an officer. I can't tell you something. I've had that conversation. No, I'll never be an officer.
Right.
You should be an officer. And sometimes people have to get to that path themselves. Like they drive a really bad officer and go, "Why did I not take that lieutenant's test?"
Yeah.
Or they realize like, "Hey, I think I have some things to share." And it's tough because in the American Fire Service, like you have braggarts and then you have humble.
Yeah.
And that in between is really blurry. And you can recognize the braggarts who are like, "Yeah, just I'll tell you what leadership is. Just ask me, I'll tell you." No, I'd rather like look at the person who's really humble, who they may not want to stand in front of a group and talk, but man, you put them on a bay floor in a firehouse in a tail step talking to two probies.
Off to the races.
Oh, they're just fantastic. Does that mean they're any less of a leader than the guy who stands in front of 10,000 people? No, they're just different platforms. And so how do you get to that point? So I think professional, like you could break that down into so many things.
Oh,
and
agreed.
Some of it's personal, right? Like you set your benchmark. Like this is what I think is a professional organization. This is how we're going to achieve it. Now I'm the leader of that organization. What am I going to do to create that? And that's what's missing is that people say we want to be professional. All right, chief, what are you doing to make us professional?
That's it.
Oh, that's not my responsibility. I said be professional.
And that's the thing, right? And within such a large organization like Fairfax, you have, I guess size of the department doesn't even matter because every department has the same departments and hurdles and things that they're responsible for. And I'm not just talking departments like prevention and operations and subcode and all this crap. I'm talking about every little avenue that we deal with in our departments. If you want to have a professional agency, every single category within your organization has to be designed to be representative of what professional means to your mission.
Yeah. Well, and look, I mean, do we have egos in the fire service?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
And I would, the way Fairfax is kind of set up, we have about, once a month, twice a month, we have senior operations meeting, which is, it's 6 operations deputies, the special operations deputy, EMS deputy, myself, and then the aides assigned to not me anymore, but the ops chief, and then the 3 aides assigned to him. And so, for I think a lot of times in any organization, what can those meetings become? Like, here's an agenda. We're going to work through this agenda. Is that us leading the organization? I'd rather us have it. And I go back to like when I moved over to ops, we weren't dysfunctional at all. But like we were just coming out of COVID, which was really a difficult period for any fire department.
Yeah, sure.
But I had like 8 exceptional deputy chiefs that on their own they could go lead an organization, but their personalities were vastly different. And so our first meeting, we kind of sat down and said, all right, look, agenda, throw it away. We'll get to that point, but I want to spend some time with us. And I really want us to answer some questions. And our first question is, what is our definition of culture? So let's just have a thought process between us as the leaders of this organization, because those deputies are leading 400 people every single day.
Right.
Not me. They're in the firehouse. They're doing it every single day. My job is not to tell them how to go do it. It's to say, hey man, here's the commander's intent. How you achieve it, I could care less. But we're all going to go towards the same commander's intent. So we spent some time saying, all right, what's the definition of culture? And so we came up with the definition of culture. And said, okay, what's our current culture? And we said, hey, we all came to this conclusion. This is our current culture. Third question, what do we want our culture to be? And so we weren't too far off. Like what our current culture was and what we want our culture to be wasn't that far off. And then the last and most important question is, what are you willing to do to have some skin in this game to make us achieve and maintain that culture? And that's the tangible thing. We say, okay, now we know before we even start talking about the nuts and bolts of running of an organization, we're all on the same page. We understand like this is what culture is. This is where we want our culture to be. And we are all willing to put our skin in the game. And then for you as a leader, it's funny, I had some really great aides. I mean, these guys were just fantastic. And I remember sitting down with them the first day and said, listen, we would meet every Monday. I said, I want you to think about what your job is as my aide. Like, what is your job? And so that, the next week they had a whole list, a multitude of things.
Right.
Boom, boom, boom. I said, you have one job. Your job is to protect me from me. That's it.
I love it.
Because I'm going to have these harebrained ideas, and I need you to look at me and go, terrible idea, Chief. And they were really good because, they had some, tells that if I had an idea, they'd be like, Chief, let me get you some more information on that, which equal to, what the hell are you talking about?
Where are you going? Where are you going with this? Yeah.
Well, and that put the burden on me to say, all right, I haven't explained this well enough, or these guys who are still, they would work in headquarters, but they also worked a lot of overtime and did budget staffing. So they were still in the firehouse.
Sure, they know what's going on.
Yeah, to tell me like, hey, the ground truth is, you shouldn't do that, or we're not ready for that. And so it was great. And then, the other part of it too is like, if you're that leader, you're the one that sits ahead of the table. You're the one who makes the ultimate decision. But I'd say it's almost like a 70-30 split, right?
Right.
70% of you listening to what your people who are leading every single day, and 30% of you talking.
If you're willing to listen.
Yeah, if you're willing to listen. So, we changed a lot of the way we would run the organization of, and look, the only thing that we're going to talk about are action items. What are we doing for those 1,500 people in operations? They may not all love it. I know they don't all love it, but this is where we're going to take the organization because this is our culture. This is where we want to get to. So let's talk about these things that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And then let's be transparent. Whatever we talk about in this room, we send out to the field so they can see what's happening with the people they entrust to be in the leadership positions. And again, they may not love all of it, but at least they know what's happening. And they know that we're not just sitting here doing nothing. Let's talk about these tangible things. And, for me, it was educational too. But the other part of it that's really great is once you get that, I know like the really, the not the catchy word or what they call it, psychological safety is what it is, right?
Right.
I want, even at the highest level, for us to sit here and have a conversation and not for you to hear from me as your boss, hey, it's a terrible idea. But that became our kitchen table. Because, as a chief, you lose the kitchen table.
Right.
But, a chief might have an idea. One of his peers will start busting his chops. Like, what are you thinking about, man? That's a terrible idea for this reason. But they would hash it out because they know what impacts all of them every single day. And that's really important. And if you can do that at the highest level,
well, that's it.
Guess what permeates down through the ranks? That, hey, I can have an idea. It may not get to the finish line, but I might be heard, where I'll be told why it's not going to happen.
We got to put a level of checks and balances in the system at every level.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, especially for a leader, again, another great Stoic, but a leader does anything, not everything, which is important. Like, I'll do anything, but I'm not doing everything.
Right.
And that means making a decision on everything. Like, let's make a decision as a group, because as a group, we lead this, and we all walk out of this room and go, yeah, we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
We're good. I had my opportunity to voice my displeasure with whatever we're doing. I didn't win the argument. Carry on.
You got to be able to carry on. I mean, that's, and that's where, it's all of this is awesome. Like, it's powerful, it's strong, it's motivating. And then, you're going to have people that are listening to this episode, and they're going to be like, it just doesn't happen here. You know what I mean? And that is that real trench talk. And we have people, and this is the one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know you speak about leadership and being a part of that West Point leadership program and moving up through the battalion and deputy to the, assistant chief spot. These are leadership positions, and you've been in those positions over your tenure, but we have people today starving for leadership information. I've never seen it like it is today. And I'm not just talking to the fire service. I'm talking general. We look at people today. People are starving for more information on how to lead. Podcasts, books, motivational, social media, you name it. People are putting out programs. You have a program, part of your 25 to survive, right? Reducing residential injury in line of duty. Part of that is setting people up for a successful career, and that has to do with leadership. People are starving for information on leadership, but a big part of leadership is doing it.
Yeah.
And we can't take shortcuts. And so classes and things that you've done to better yourself and educate yourself certainly piggyback onto your actual experience. And that is the one thing that we have to talk more about in the fire service is experience does matter. And when it comes to leadership, you have to have some type of experience behind you. Your pedigree has to have some merit to it. And we can't lead on theory. We have to lead from practicality and experience. People are starving, Chief, for leadership. Why? Why are we impatient today?
Yeah, well, one, I think the difficult, and if you haven't picked up, I love using some quotes because nothing's
I love
really
it.
new,
Yes.
right? Reagan said this, right? He said, "Success has 1,000 fathers. Failure is an orphan." He's right, because leaders, right? Leaders all want to be successful. None of them want to be unsuccessful, so they don't want to be the orphan that's out there. And I think you kind of hit on it, and I share this with a lot of people. It's like leadership is really easy. The application's difficult.
I like that.
Anyone can read a book. I could prophesize and write on a whiteboard all day long all these leadership theories. But let me sit you down with your really good friend who you came up to the fire service with. You're the company officer, they're the firefighter, and they make just a terrible moral decision that you have to hold them accountable.
Right.
That's leadership.
Yep. You ready to go?
You ready to do it? And again, I go back to my organization with, we do this thing called LDI, and some really great people put it together. It's an in-house resident program. You have to leave your home. You have to live at this location.
Wow.
And it is a week intensive from 5 a.m. until 10 p.m. every night on leadership.
Now, is that just for a particular position or open to anybody that applies? Or
anyone. There's a command school and there's
Love
a company officer one.
Love it.
And if you're aspiring, you can do it.
Cool.
And part of what probably the most impactful thing they do is the role playing. Like they bring in guys, you have to sit in front of your peers, you have to work through these situations, and they bring in firefighters who are some fantastic actors who can cry, right now, get angry, and you're like, what do I do with this?
Yeah.
And I think if we adopted, like we have seen a huge shift in the way we train, like tactical training, right? we've learned about stress. And so we teach you how to force a door. And you and I will go outside dressed like this, and I'll show you, here's your gap set force, and then put your gear on. Let's do it again. Put your SCBA on. Let's do it again. Let's put your, in zero visibility, do it again. Let's increase the amperage, right? Let's have some sounds, have some people yelling at you. And so you learn this. Why don't we do the same thing with leadership?
Right.
Let me teach you this skill, man. Like, I need you to go have this tough conversation with someone. And then let's amp it up. Let's take it higher. Let's get the person to be vocal in how we do it. And I think, people are starving for leadership because they want to be good leaders. They want to be led. People want to be led. Like, people want to be a part of a winning team. Has anyone ever said, like, I like that losing team? That company on the fireground, they're terrible. I want to be a part of that. No, they see a company that's really good and they want to be a part of that. They want to go join that because that's the leadership that's happening. And I think that, like, the more that we can focus on teaching those finite skills and then testing those skills more and more to get people ready to go do it. But the biggest part of that equation is I was really happy. I was an engine driver for 7 years. Man, I love driving an engine. Loved it. I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't work out so well for me. Didn't work out so well for me at all. Because every time I got to a position, it was like I looked around and said, all right, well, my mentors had told me, you can't complain about something if you're not willing to change.
That's right.
You can't complain about something if you're not willing to throw your hat in the ring. And yes, is it a sacrifice on your family, your time, studying for exams? Is it a sacrifice because you're leaving what's comfortable? And we know in the fire service, much like in life, in the uncomfortable is where we thrive. So, you know what? I'm going to take the company officer position. I didn't really care for lieutenant. I really wanted to be a captain because I love engines. And our captains ride the engine. I'm going to do the captain thing. Oh, I love being a captain. I want to be a chief.
Right.
And so you look around and go, well, if not you, then who?
I love that.
And if that who is someone you never want to work for, then you better keep your mouth shut and stop complaining about poor leadership because you just let them take that civil service test and pass you. But if you really are passionate about leadership and you think you can make a difference, then welcome to the uncomfortable.
I love that.
Because it's about the impact. And I think that's where we're missing the mark is that you routinely ask people, like, who wants to be the fire chief? I mean, part of the reason I retired, right, is I love my job, absolutely love my job. But I didn't want to be the fire chief in Fairfax. Not that I would, even get that position, but I was number 2 position there. But I shouldn't sit there and hold this position if you are looking at that number 2 to be your successor. So let me get out of the way of these other people. I've had a fantastic run. There's a shelf life for an ops chief. Let me get out of the way of these other people who might be the next fire chief to give you the opportunity to really mentor them and make them the next greatest thing for this organization I love. And I think that's where, like, the more and more of our people can just look, yes, are you not going to ride a fire truck anymore? Yeah, but you can have a greater impact. And that's what it was about for me for every one of those positions.
You got to have a seat at the table, right, Chief? If, some of our best people, if they don't want to promote up, if they don't want to move up, their voice isn't as strong. We need good, solid voices at the table of where decisions are being made. And if we just keep promoting losers, if we keep putting people up the chain that don't represent what the core values are or the mission of the department or the people below them, we're never going to make a department. We're never going to make opportunities, strategies, tactics, culture, tradition. All those things will wane because we don't have the right people at the table.
I mean, think about if you were the person who was kind of a lackluster individual and you looked around and go, man, I can make more money. I can make more money if I take a lieutenant's test.
Right.
Oh, I heard Jeremy's not taking a lieutenant's test. That guy's bright as hell. He's not taking a test because he wants to ride a fire truck?
Yep.
My competition just got less.
That's right.
And my challenge would be, hey, why don't you make it difficult for me as the ops chief of who to select to be the next lieutenant or captain instead of making it really easy because there's only one person because that's the only person who wants to step up because they want more money. Versus, man, make it really difficult. I have 4 really great, thoughtful leaders who are going for this one position. They all have a great resume and they're all willing to step up because that's what I would look at. Like, we always had this conversation, Butler and I would always have this conversation when we're looking at people for certain positions. Their resumes might be exactly the same. And they'd say, what's their organizational contribution?
Right.
What have they done to contribute to the organization? not, not just, checking the resume, but like really deep stuff. Like oh man, they had an idea. They brought that idea up. They formed a committee and it came to fruition. They were part of this committee. Like, our manuals, we have these really great manuals that, again, no manuals putting a fire out, but they're legacy documents. And it's a lot of work. And, I would look and see like this person's been part of the manual committee for X amount of times and make a phone call like, hey, did they contribute or are they just
Right.
trying to fill a seat to fill the resume? Oh, no, they really contribute. And so you have your fingerprints on all this stuff. And so that's what it's all about. It's like, if you have all this knowledge, you have all this experience, if you're holding it to yourself, that's not good leadership. How do you get it out to the masses? Because you may not have the confidence to think you might be a great leader, but how would you know until you do it?
That's right.
And when you go do it, you look around and go, okay, who do I know? Because the great thing about all this access we have now is years ago, you couldn't connect with a guy in the FDNY or Chicago or the middle of America or anywhere else, right? But now you can. So you can have this forum where you can say, look, man, I just want to make these connections. It's like what we tell guys when we do FDIC is, if you walk out of this class, I hope, you get some good information. But at a minimum, what you should do is look to your left and look to your right, and you probably see people who you will never see again in your life. You'll never have any interaction with because you're from Ohio, he's from Seattle, and he's from Miami. Make the connection.
That's right. Shake a hand.
Form a bond.
Yep.
Yeah. Get some telephone numbers, get some emails, and make a connection. And start to bridge that gap that you can share all this information. And then you start to get some confidence. You get outside your silo and you realize, like, I can do this. Because you're not going to be perfect. I mean, I'm sure you haven't either. I've never been to a perfect fire yet.
No.
That's why I hate that statement, like, failure is not an option. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard.
Right. Failure happens every day.
Like, the reason that we haven't had polio is because a scientist
right.
tried to find a vaccine, said failed. They didn't give up.
That's right.
They did the next thing. They did the next thing. So you fail quickly and be resilient, adapt, and then you overcome. And so that's where, like, as our leaders, if you complain about leadership, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, like, where are you in the organization? If you're a 15-year firefighter who just doesn't want to take that test because you're not going to buy into that crap position, well, I mean, you can't complain so much because you're not throwing your hat in the ring and say, I want to sit at that table.
Yeah.
I want to sit at the table and I want to see if I can change it.
Yeah. There's a lot there. I mean, it's that personal drive, of course. I think some of it, though, is, I think of you and I listened to you today in this conversation, and I know where this is coming from. It's not just yourself, but it's also the organizations from which you came. And they help shape you, too. And so, again, back to that word professional, Fairfax created a professional environment. People want to promote there. People, your organization is looking for the best, and people know that in their tenure they need to be a part of different organizations and groups within the department to better their chances because they want the chance. Some departments, guys want nothing to do with it, and again, it's just that culture, it's that department. I get that. We have, and the only reason I bring that up, Chief, is just because that's reality of the fire service. And unfortunately I deal with more of that side of it than this professional conversation we're having. I mean, and it's just reality.
And it's tough. And the other part of that that's pretty difficult is, who doesn't love having a well-tenured firefighter?
Right.
The informal leader in a fire.
Yeah, we need that backstep guy with 25 years. There's no doubt.
I mean, yes. So you don't need everyone to be an officer.
Right.
So it really is difficult. And I think, this is not to say like, hey, as a chief officer, you should abdicate your responsibility. But this is the stuff that happens at the kitchen table between the company officers, because the key to our success in the American Fire Service is our small unit leaders.
I love that.
And what they do. And if a small unit leader, like every fire that we go to, like we had a really great system in Fairfax we were able to implement before I left called Suppression QA that allowed us to look at those 7 things and see how good we were. And it gave us a great report card. And the thing that resonates throughout that entire process is none of that makes a difference unless I have really strong company officers.
Yes.
They're the ones that make it happen. And the reason it happened on the fire ground happened long before we ever got to that fire. It's what they did at the kitchen table. It's what they did every day they trained. It's what they did for those 24 hours in that firehouse, whether it was their leadership or their training, everything else. That is the key to what we do. And that's what we want our smaller leaders to understand is like, you are the link to us being successful.
Right.
And what you do every single day, while you may think that like, hey, it doesn't make a difference, it does. So either you can focus on what you can control, or you can spend your time on the things you can't control. Can you control what the fire chief's going to do? No. Can you control what you're going to say and do at this kitchen table? 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where, like, we have to always, it's easy to slip into that slope. I mean, I remember like one of the elections, it was back and forth. And I was talking to one of the captains. He's like, man, these guys just won't stop talking about the Republican or Democrat. I'm like, well, here's what you do, man. Every time that they say Republican, say we're going to go pull 2.5. And every time they talk about a Democrat, go throw a 35. And guess what? You just changed the whole conversation to,
Right.
if you want to talk about that, let's talk about something that's going to kill us. Our inability to execute on the fireground, not the election. You can't control that.
Right.
So let's focus on this thing. And you as a leader have that tremendous impact of having that on individuals, because that's what, remember, like, no one has ever said to a probationary firefighter, like, hey, who was your first ops chief?
Right.
What they say is, who's your captain?
Yeah, who's your captain?
Yeah, because you are a reflection of them. Like when you get detailed into another firehouse and say, hey, what company you work at? Oh, yeah. Who's your captain? Oh, okay, good. Or, oh my God.
Yeah, there's a lot
impact
to
you
that.
have.
No doubt.
Yeah,
no
it's
doubt.
huge.
I want to
Small
ask you.
unit leader is so essential.
Yeah, I want to shift a little bit because I want to give a little attention to this. The course that you do with Doug Mitchell is a good friend of yours out of the FDNY. You guys have your class, and from your class came a book, 25 to Survive: Reducing Residential Injury and Line of Duty Deaths. I alluded to it before, but I'd love a little background about this class, what it's about, and then, of course, the book, how it piggybacks on that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So, Doug is my brother from another mother. We've been friends for 32 years.
Awesome.
So we both walked into Ellicott City as volunteers the same year.
That department seems to put out. I bet you they have a great culture there as well, because I've heard so many people that have come out of that system or are familiar with it or what have you, but it just sounds like a really good place.
Oh, it's just fantastic, man. As a typical like high school degenerate, I had to go do community service hours. So I was trying to find the easiest path I possibly could. I think I went to a nursing home. I was like there for 5 minutes. I said, no, this ain't for me. And one of my guidance counselors said, you can go do volunteer firefighting. I'm like, all right, I'm in. I walked into 3 different firehouses. The first 2, I was like, no way. I walked in Ellicott City. It was great.
Was this your introduction to the fire service?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, that was my introduction. I mean, I'm a Sicilian Irish guy. My father has, multitudes of siblings.
Sure.
One of my brothers is a federal agent. He and I are the first 2 in public safety in our entire family.
Wow.
So there was no like legacy, unlike Doug, who his dad was the FDNY, his brother was in the FDNY. So Doug was down there for college. We both walked in the door the same day. He was 6 months after me, so he's got less experience. We always joke about that.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. You got to give him a zinger on that one.
Yeah. But then he always busts my chops because he got hired in the 89th recruit school in Fairfax. I was in the 90th. So
okay.
And then his number came up in the FDNY in 99. He went back to there, and we've always been remained great friends. But when Doug and I would do some teaching back and forth, like I just, we would always look at these line of duty deaths, and I would get so frustrated by the commonality in all these reports. And the other part of it too was, if you drop a report like that on my organization or Doug's, we can handle it, right? Mm-hmm. If you said, hey, you got to take your engines from 4-person staffing to 5-person staffing, okay, we'll make the adjustment. But 99% of the other organizations in the world who just suffered a line of duty death, who have 1 guy on a truck, and you say you need 5 on a truck,
right?
That's never going to happen. So like they're already down. Now you're just pushing them even further down.
Yes.
So we looked at that and said, man, there was no solutions. That was the other part. There was no solutions to these problems that were like tangible, that a small unit leader or this probationary firefighter could pull out and do. So what we wanted to do was look at across the country. There's 25 commonalities, whether it was large, small, urban, suburban, rural, volunteer paid, didn't matter. That all these things would impact you in an organization, because once you realize that most line of duty deaths are like a calamity of errors, a calamity of basic firefighter 1 and 2 failures that happen. Are they bad firefighters? No. But we looked at that and said, hey, here's the 25 most common. And then we wanted to say, here's 25 tips, drills, or techniques to overcome that. So if I go back to what I really firmly believe is that we don't have an unwillingness to train the American Fire Service. We don't know how to train. So if we can give you 25 drills that you can then say, the reason we're doing this drill is because this brother or sister died in the line of duty death, and we could face the same situation, and now we're prepared to overcome that. And so that was, we did this class, we put it together, and it was just really fun to do because we weren't teaching to a curriculum. We were sharing experience. And it wasn't
Yeah.
so much that, Doug and I always tell guys, like, you're not going to get the Fairfax way or the FDNY way because you don't have the staffing and infrastructure we do. But these things we're going to share with you, you can do anywhere. And you don't have to be the officer, you don't have to be the chief. You can do this as a firefighter. And guess
It's
what?
fundamentals.
If you're doing these drills, other people are going to see you doing it going, what are you doing? Why are you doing it?
Right.
I'll do that with you. And the other beautiful part of it too is we always tell guys in class, like, if you find a better way to do a drill than what we've written, tell us about it, and we'll name the drill after you, man. Because no one cares about credit. It's about us sharing this message in this platform. So we had done that for a few years, and then the gracious people at Fire Engineering come to us and said, "Hey, what do you think about writing a book?" And both Doug and I kind of laughed, like, "Are you kidding me?"
I love it.
So as perfectionists and procrastinators, we signed our contract, and about 4 months later, we were at the beach together. I'm like, "Hey, man, have you written anything for this?" He's like,
maybe
"No."
we should look at this.
I'm like, "We probably should do this now." So
I love it.
So we kind of buttoned down and wrote. Doug did 12 chapters, I did 12 chapters, and we split the intro. And thank God for my mother, who is a retired school English teacher. She was our main editor, and she kind of tore it apart so that you couldn't tell whose voice was what for each one of those.
Right.
And so it was great. It was really great to be able to write that and say, okay, we want to kind of share this in a different. It's almost like sharing in a different capacity to put in people's hands, so that if they don't come to the class, they can kind of get the same thing. And the good thing is now, Doug and I it's hard to believe, like, the book is cresting 10 years old.
Yeah.
So we're kind of coming back together to rewrite a new edition of that because of some things we want to change. Some things have changed in our environment. We're dealing with different challenges now, a little bit beyond. And when we wrote that, I was a captain and Doug was a lieutenant. So we have a different perspective now of where we are that we want to kind of share. So, that was kind of the evolution of it. It was really a pretty cool process, and it was a great thing to do with your best friend, which is always nice.
Well, one thing that stands out to me, and I wrote it down, and it's funny in my process how I make notes. I write them down, or I write them down, underline, circle, and star, right? Because it's like the priority of the message. Yeah. This one, I couldn't agree with you more. It's no solutions to these problems. We need to be offering more ideas on how we create solutions to what we're dealing with. And I feel like the fire service today, much like the fire service is starving for leadership and wisdom, how to lead and be a manager or a leader, we throw out all these ideas and we talk ideas and we say this and we talk about this and we should do it this way and it should be this way and blah, blah, blah. What's the path to get there? Who's helping share that blueprint? Who's creating that playbook that we can lean on, right? You were talking about all the line of duties, Josh Laird's line of duty, right? And you referred to that before and a couple other things. Like, looking at that, the NIOSH reports are great, but they're not a full story because guys aren't sharing all the information, right? No. And the process isn't as good as I think it could be, right? And so my point is this, is like, where do smaller departments that are limping along because they don't have the resources or the funding or the people to do more, where's the playbook for them that they can just lean on the fire service? Because that's what this is supposed to be about. It's like that senior man mentality. It's like, it drives me nuts in the fire service when people are charging other brothers and sisters for their information or knowledge. I get books and conferences. I'm talking about like other types of things. It drives me crazy. We should be propelling this job forward by sharing, talking, and working with one another. We need more solutions, Chief, and you said that. No solutions to these problems is what created this course and this book, and I give you a lot of credit for that because you're taking that, the bull by the horns with that, and I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and it's a privilege, right? I always was frustrated by the fact that, like, how do we honor, and even it's my kind of maturation of my career. Who do we blame when there's a line of duty death? Usually one or two people. We blame the person who's dead. Well, that's really easy because they can never defend themselves.
Right, they can't. Right.
or we blame the incident commander.
That's right.
Okay, if I looked at your organization, how many people were on the fire ground? Oh, there were 60 people on the fire ground. How many people were supporting the command post? Well, the chief. So one guy is carrying the burden. So we don't even look deeper into that and what we do. And I think the command aspect of it, it's one of the things I'm kind of focusing on now in retirement, is doing a little more writing on that topic. Is we just don't really spend enough time of preparing our people for command. And it doesn't mean being a chief. Like most organizations, you may not get a chief who's in command. You may be thrusted in that position because you're the person who showed up to the firehouse and right in the right front seat, and you're in command. How do you go about doing this, and how do you operate that way? Because you've never had any really true training in how to do it. And I think the more that we can spend on kind of educating every aspect of it, like one of the easiest drills, right? Taking the NIOSH report. One of those maxims of command is your job is to recognize red flags and anomalies on the fire ground and act accordingly. It's one thing to recognize a red flag. Hey, you call me from the number 1 floor after you've been there for 10 minutes and Chief, we can't find a fire. It's getting hot here. Giant red flag.
Red flag, yeah.
Waving. Okay, well, what do you do with it? Nothing. Or you hear a firefighter call Mayday and the natural inclination is hit the evacuation tones. I just said I'm going to die in here and you're telling everyone to leave?
Right.
And so is that incident commander? Not chief, not officer? Is he a bad person? No, he's following the system that he's been brought up into.
Yes.
That was probably put together in a climate-controlled room with no stress. And we have to be dynamic in how we operate. So one of the drills I would always give our guys is like, take every one of those line of duty death reports that has the audio transcript in there, has an entire audio transcript. And every place you see a red flag or anomaly that the incident commander dealt with, highlight it. Then in the margin, write what your response would be. How would you handle that? That's free experience.
Yes.
So I hear, hey, I see how the incident evolved. Oh, we got high heat, can't find the fire. All right, what would I do? How would I handle this? What would be my transmission? What would be my first transmission in that situation? All right, I'd probably tell them to pull back to the threshold, make sure the truck is, the truck knows that the line is coming back to the front door and if they can find a window because we can't really see the fire, reassign some resources to see if there's a basement. But if you don't ever rehearse that, I mean, like, what do you do for promotional exams? You rehearse situations over and over again to prepare. Why are we not rehearsing what we're going to do on the fire ground?
Mm.
The visualization and the routine, like, if I had this situation, what am I going to do? So use those line of duty death reports as free experience. Like, I'm going to look at this line of duty death report and say, if I run this commercial type building and I had these guys pull up, and I think it's San Antonio is where they had that situation, pull up 3 o'clock in the morning in a gym that's not occupied, and they're forcing entry to do a search. Red flag. So we're not going to demonize what they did because we might do the same exact thing, but we're going to learn from them. So if I heard that transmission, my next transmission coming down the road might be, hey, hold on for a second. Do you have a hose line with you? No. Get a hose line. Make sure you do the search for the hose line. Make sure you make a scan with the thermal imager up into the plenum space, see if you have fire above you. That's because you're getting that free experience from the loss of one of our firefighters.
Mm.
But to simply read it and go, yeah, that's terrible what happened, and close it and don't do anything about it, you're doing a disservice to the downed firefighter.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Chief. I really do. I think there's a lot there in the last few minutes of this conversation, dynamite, because that's what we need to do. We need to learn from one another, and especially through, tragedy that has taken our own. There's lessons to be learned. We need to double down on that, no doubt.
Well, and I think one of the greatest things, and believe me, I could go off on this tangent for hours, but and this is coming from someone who works in Fairfax. It's always deemed as like this safe place. We do these really safe things. We have become so arrogant with the English language to think that we can redefine the word safe. And that's the problem, right? So if you look at, I ask guys in class all the time, what's the definition of safe? Kind of just, in typical class, no one wants to raise their hand and say, I was wrong. And the definition of safe is free from harm. And so I show them a multitude of pictures of fires that either from my organization or just, fires that are circulated out there on the internet. Tell me anything in this picture that's safe. Tell me anything in this picture that's free from harm. None of what we do is free from harm.
Right.
The inside of your turnout jacket says this job is inherently dangerous. So if our turnout jacket knows it, why do we not know it? And so what happens is, like, if you continue to be so arrogant and think you can redefine what the word safe is, then you become an incident commander who goes, well, I need a safe fire ground. Now, do I want a fire ground that's free from harm as an ops chief? 100%. But we don't get there by just me simply saying, be safe. If you want to be safe, here's what you should do. And Mike Rowe said this. I love when he does the safety third message. We should make no left turns, and we should drive cars with helmets.
That's right.
Because the most dangerous thing you're going to do is drive to work. But what we need to teach people is prudent risk-taking. If we're not teaching every day to our firefighters what prudent risk-taking is, and then as a chief officer saying, look, I want you to be aggressive. And here's what aggressive means, because I want you to exercise prudent risk-taking. Why? Because there's merits to risk. And what's the merits of risk? So if I show you a picture of a house that has fire blown out of the 4 windows that occupy the entire house, would you do a search? I would hope you say, not right now. Why? Because there's no merit to the risk. But if I show you that same picture and there's one window that's not pushing fire, that has a little bit of smoke, and it's a bedroom, I said, would you do a search? Yeah, I'd do a search in that room. Why? Because the merit of risk is I can save that person who might potentially be in that bedroom. The rest of the house, I can't do much until I can knock that fire down. But we just arbitrarily assume everyone understands what that level of risk is because we don't teach prudent risk taking. And so as a leader, as an informal leader, as a person with experience, that's where we have to change the scope of and say, look, stop just arbitrarily using the word safe and understand what we're trying to do is teach prudent risk taking, which is an arduous process, right? Because it encompasses so much of what we deal with on the fire ground and what those merits of risk are, so that you, that savvy, experienced company officer, that day you take off and those 3 people in your engine who you love, well, when they show up with a new officer who's there on overtime, who doesn't understand the same experience, they can take your knowledge you share with them and say, hey, I'm going to look at that structure. We can exercise some high level of prudent risk taking right now because this is what we're going to do. Versus, hey, well, the officer just always jumps through that window, so I'm going to go jump through that window. And then we see another line of duty death report.
It's good. Prudent risk taking. I love that. I just did an episode not too long ago about the safety culture stigma with Scottsdale, Arizona assistant chief. Great conversation.
Eric?
Yeah, Eric. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to be down. I'm going to be actually at their conference this year. I'm going to be speaking, and I'm excited to do that because I want to bring some. I want to talk about the dirty word of safety, and and finding the commonality between what it actually is versus what we envision it should be, and it's 2 very different things. And you certainly have a lot of thoughts around that. I love it, and yeah, thanks for sharing that, Chief. That was really good. There's a lot to that. I want to say this, that with the time wrapping up here and so on, this has been an outstanding conversation. And I didn't think it'd be anything less, to be honest with you, and not knowing you, but watching you. And I want to kind of just full circle, like back to our first interaction where I sat in the crowd watching you speak. You speak with true conviction and passion. And I think that is what we need more of in the fire service. We need leaders and we need people that know where they're coming from and where they want to go. And their message has to follow suit. And I will tell you, Dan, today, no doubt, really impressed with this conversation. I had a lot of fun with you. And I look forward to shaking your hand and, meeting you in person. But I'd love to do this again with you. I think there's a lot of great opportunity here. And your messages are just super strong. So listen, man, congratulations on retirement. Congratulations on the facial hair. And, I love it, man. It's today was a real testament to the 32 years in the fire service that you've put in. And, nothing's slowing you down. I can see that. So you got a lot ahead of you, man. I'm excited for you.
Yeah. No, thanks, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm with you. How can you not be passionate about this job? And I think one of the greatest benefits or things I'm proudest of my job is I held every rank from that probationary firefighter. It taught me so much. And every time I got in a tough situation was always go back to what's that individual feeling and doing when they're in that position, and not being so removed from it that you get up to that rank, and just finding that dichotomy between being a leader of an organization, but also remembering what it was like to be on the back step of an engine company and what that thought process was. And Yeah, it's always nice to go down memory lane, and I appreciate you kind of escorting me down that today. So
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. Chief, thank you very much. Dan Shaw, I appreciate it. Dan, if anybody wants to reach out to you, maybe talk to you about your program that you do with Doug or anything else, where can they find you? Where can they reach out?
So easiest way is just my email is chiefdshaw@gmail.com. And then
Awesome.
just about to push out because trying to put all this stuff together because I'm doing some consulting and other stuff. But chiefdanshaw.com should be up and running in the next
Cool.
week or so.
Awesome. Congratulations with that.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah, good. Dan, thank you very much for spending some time with me today. I know how busy you are. Good luck with the deck. And hang out. Don't go anywhere. I'm just going to sign off, and I'll come right back to you, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks.
Cool. Guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode, excuse me, of the National Fire Radio Podcast. Another stellar episode with a great guest, retired Assistant Chief of Operations from Fairfax County, Virginia, Dan Shaw, doing great things, and what a great conversation. So do me a favor, because shows like this are so good with our guests, take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse and talk about it, because when we're talking about the job, we're making the job better. We'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire Radio.